Awakening is a challenging process at times. And so it's quite easy to see how we could get stuck or just have things put on hold for a while as far as our progress with awakening. And there are many ways and many reasons why this can happen. One could be because we're tapping into the identity here, this fixed identity who we thought we were. And it's made up of all the ideas that we have about ourselves and all our beliefs about the world and other people, all our ideas and concepts, everything that we know about being a person, being in the world, as well as all our repressed emotions and traumas in the body, in the nervous system, all these patterns, dysfunctional behaviors, all of this that makes up the illusory self. We can get to a point with this deconstruction that is happening of the identity where we instinctively or intuitively don't want to go any further because it's getting too painful. So we all have certain pain thresholds, and so each person will get to a certain point and usually maybe stall out for a while something is difficult before they can keep progressing. And this may be because there's too much trauma in the system and it's too overwhelming to face it all at that time. And they might need assistance from a therapist. Perhaps their nervous system's dysregulated and they need some assistance to get healing for that. But it can feel like it's too much content. It's too overwhelming to face all of this and then try to shut down the awakening process. And this can happen quite unconsciously, not you deliberately doing it. We sort of pull away from that and perhaps try to stay in the earlier stage, the transcendent phase, where you're transcending the content, the identity. So you can still have glimpses and tastes of reality, but not have to do the work to deconstruct the identity, which is the painful part. So it's understandable why people would want to stay in the transcendent state, which does feel good. But as far as progress for awakening, it's really all about deconstructing this identity so that you can go deeper into embodying your being in the body and emptying out the center and it growing and emptying of content. And so it may be a particular trauma is too difficult to face. It could be shadow work, something about yourself is hard to face, something that you did in the past that you have shame about, a behavior that you have that you're not willing to face. There's so many examples of what it could be, but it's basically something in the identity gets too painful to look at. And so you can get stuck at that point until you feel ready to face that through however, which could be in therapy, it might be outside of awakening, to face those parts, because every single part of what was repressed wants to be loved and seen again. It wants to be remembered again and become whole again. And so some of that is going to be painful. So you could see how you could get stuck here. So you can get stuck because you have a dysregulated nervous system, and that can stop you from being able to make progress, because if you're dysregulated due to trauma, you are unable to go deeply into your being. You're unable to be present. The nervous system won't allow it. And there can be too much content, too much trauma in the system to allow that relaxing that happens that helps you to access presence. And so this can become a block as well, a dysregulated nervous system. And this is where I would suggest getting help, doing things like craniosacral therapy, somatic experiencing, something that works on the nervous system specifically so that you can relax very deeply to help you to access your essential nature. We can get stuck because there's a truth that we don't want to see, that life is trying to show us. And that could be about something that's happening in our life that's no longer serving us and needs to drop away, an attachment that we have to something. And it's helping to support the awakening process, because life is us. And we're always helping ourselves to remember ourselves. But sometimes this is painful. And so if it's something that we're really attached to and we don't want to let go of, but life is showing this is the time to let go of this thing, then of course that resistance to that will create a block and stop progress with awakening. And this can also happen with seeing truths about reality. Some of them are shocking and painful. They all end up being totally fine and you adapt to every single one that you see. But just initially, they might be a shock to see that I am alone. Well, there's no other people here. I've always been alone. And so when we start touching up upon some of these truths that are a little bit more painful than others, we can block ourselves there because we're not willing to see what is trying to be shown to us, what is trying to be realized. And so we can unconsciously do something to try and move away from that, like start a new relationship or become part of a social group or something to distract ourselves. So it's really about having a willingness to be in a bit of pain, a bit of sort of psychological pain, and be able to be courageous enough to see the things that are being shown to us. And some of them are going to be painful and difficult. And so any one of these steps along the way, we can just stall out for a while. And then when we feel like we're ready, we can start moving forward again. But we can really get stuck at any one of these points. And that's where the awakening will stay for that life if you can't get beyond that. For example, if you can't face existential fear and that's too overwhelming for you, then you won't be able to go beyond that. And so I would suggest find ways, getting some therapy or something to help work on the fear in the system would certainly help you to progress with fear. There's lots of things you can do to help, but it could be more in the therapy world that we're talking about here when we're talking about unpacking the identity, particularly if there's a lot of trauma in the system. So there's a lot of healing that wants to be done. And then that will make the awakening process go a lot more smoothly and be a lot less triggering. But I'd say the number one way that I see people stopping progress with awakening is through a misunderstanding of where they're at on the path. So if you think that you're further along than you are on the path because of following a teacher that doesn't understand awakening, being misguided in some way, perhaps self-diagnosing where you're at with awakening, which is, I think, largely coming from the information age that we have and having all this access to different teachers on YouTube. This has sort of created this problem where a lot of people are confused about where they're at on the path and they're not checking in with someone to be guided to what's happening with them, where they're stuck. And so it can be very easy to delude ourselves if we're just following someone on YouTube. And so if we think that we're further along than we are, if we think we're awake when we're not, that just stops the seeker energy because we're no longer looking for ourselves. And you can stall out completely with that for the rest of that life. And that happens quite a lot. This typically seems to happen to people that are in the transcendent phase of awakening, which is the earliest stage where we're transcending the identity. We're going up and beyond it and getting glimpses of reality. And this stage feels really good. And so we can either want to stay at this stage because that's sufficient for us. We don't really want to feel bad or feel like we want to unpack what's hiding out in the identity, and that's fine. We want to stay in the transcendent phase. But a lot of people can misunderstand that they can access reality now for that meaning that they're awake or that the awakening process is complete, which will stop awakening from happening. So it takes a lot of humility and a beginner's mind and really a true longing for truth, a real love affair with truth, to go beyond these blocks. But this one to see that, and just to question, perhaps if I'm not really unraveling the identity, so nothing in my life is really changing, things aren't dropping away, I'm not changing, my behaviors aren't changing. It seems as though the identity is really intact here. I'm not really going through any particular challenges of letting go of identity, like seeing traumas and doing emotional work and doing, deep work on the psyche. I don't seem to be going through that. Is it possible that I'm just transcending? And that means, yes, there is more to go. The identity wants to be unpacked. And then it's just, do I have a willingness to transition into a deeper state of awakening, which may be harder, will likely be harder, but will have a big payoff in the end because the identity will be gone, and then you get to live from reality and be peaceful and joyful permanently. So it's like, do I want that? Can I tell that this transcendent phase, something feels like it's not quite right, it's not quite the answer, it's not quite the end, and be humble and say, what can I do now to try and unpack this identity? So if we get stuck in the transcendent phase, we can often start teaching from that. We can get very deeply into this phase and even begin teaching. That's very common on YouTube. And I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just that there's so much more to go and to be experienced, and so much more depth to awakening if you wanted to keep progressing. So it really requires sort of brutal honesty with ourselves, a sincerity. It requires a beginner's mind and humility to keep going. And so I always say, just assume you're at the beginning. Don't assume that the process is done. Wherever you're at, assume you're at the beginning and act like a beginner and do everything fresh over again every day, like it's the first time you've done your practice. And if you do that and you're courageous and you face every single thing that wants to be seen, then you're unstoppable. You'll keep progressing on the awakening path.